Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 8th, 2018, and International Women's Day, apparently. I really had no idea until everybody brought it to my attention this morning, along with, well, I guess Donald Trump celebrating International Women's Day by letting it be known, at least to CNN, that he is somehow upset with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and her response over the Stormy Daniels story. So nothing can possibly top that for International Women's Day, except possibly the news that Greg Dworkin is buried under nearly 20 inches of snow, which just came through. Ooh, pictures and everything. I got some from my folks in New Jersey yesterday, so big snow day for all of you up in the Northeast. Not a flake here in Virginia. The kids are sorely disappointed. They're extremely jealous of you, even though they had a day off for wind, which is really a new one. I've never run into that one before. We've had too cold to go to school, which when I was a kid, by God, we would never have anything like that. You had to carry a burning Duraflame log with you to make it to school and back, uphill both ways, of course, and ice and snow, sub-zero, freezing temperatures, and school was in an igloo. It was terrible. Anyway, I never had that before. Then forget about school being canceled for wind. You're indoors. But okay, I understood. High winds, very high winds, hurricane force winds. Nothing wrong with the weather or anything. Just regular old day here on planet Earth. Okay, well, we're ready to roll today. Bill in Portland, Maine, under 17 feet of snow, which is amazing. I think that was what he told me. Daily Coast Radio is live now under no snow. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, grabs a shovel and starts digging up his neighbor's flower beds, looking for the missing Hope Hicks emails. Spoiler alert, I find them under the McGillicuddy's Posies. I've yet to meet anyone actually named McGillicuddy in my life, but I guess that's part of the humor. Only 7 inches of snow. Okay. Very good. Bill says, only 7 inches here. We didn't even bother to change out of our shorts, which sounds like TMI. Quite frankly. I see, like Bermuda shorts. All right, well, other than that, what else is new in the laundry situation, Bill? You can tell us all about it. They're saving on water. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Okay, we're, let's see, ready to go. The challenge of the day comes to us from Thelonious08, of course, asking if I can do a Homer Simpson voice. He's wondering what one of Trump's rambling stream of nonsense answers would sound like if read by Homer. I don't know if it would sound smarter or not. Was that the aim of that? I think it was just to draw a parallel between them. I don't know. I'd have to work on a Homer Simpson voice. I could probably conjure something up. But his voice is quite dumb. And I think evokes all of the feelings dumbness that I want to add to the commentary. I'm seeing all the stories this morning, whatever's happening today, flying by, all illustrated with pictures of Donald Trump. He's got the blank stare on his face 99% of the time. It's so irritating. And there's just nobody home behind those eyes. And it's really bothersome. And I guess that's the whole point of including those pictures. But, I mean, wow. Just daily, the reminders of what a dotard this guy really is are... It's getting to me. And you probably saw it in the Morning Post. I'm really just fed up with the guy. YOLO, nothing matters. LOL, no such thing as laws. I don't even know where to start today. Let's see. Jared Kushner, is he currently in Mexico or is he back from Mexico? All I remember is reading. I woke up suddenly and I don't know. I was in a bathtub full of ice and Jared Kushner was in Mexico. I don't know what happened. But he went off to Mexico on a private diplomatic junket, so to speak. It wasn't a private visit. He wasn't vacationing in Puerto Vallarta or anything like that. He was on his way there on behalf of the administration for meetings of who knows what, talking to who knows who about I don't know, and the ambassador to Mexico, our own ambassador to Mexico, not actually included in the meeting, which is, let's say, not in keeping with protocol, and also not particularly safe, really. When you're talking to one of your neighbors and a close ally and a big trading partner, I know, Trump wouldn't consider them an ally, which is, of course, absurd and racist, and that's where he lives in his mind space. But I don't know. So he decided to send Jared Kushner. For what reason, I'm not really sure. That's not even the Middle East. So whatever. And he went down there and he excluded the ambassador, which is either, I don't know, I don't even know where to put it anymore. On the one hand, and this is the big problem. I mean, and now I'm beginning to think that maybe they're cultivating this culture of thinking of them as stupid or, I don't know, in some way just too dim to figure out what's going on as cover. And I can't tell whether they're overly clever or under clever or too smart by half, too dumb by half. But between this and I guess yesterday's, there was like 17 different developments in Trump world that make you think either he's clear that this is against the law, but he doesn't give a damn, and he knows. I mean, there's a school of thought under which you could assume that he knows very well that something is illegal, but his mindset is, let him catch me, let him prove it. Courts move slowly. I'll be either out of office or possibly dead from a massive heart attack by the time they finally figure this out. Versus, I legitimately don't understand why anybody would even think this is problematic or illegal, because I just do what I want to do, and it's not illegal. No one's ever arrested me for it before, and I can't tell which is the operating principle. Maybe there's both. Maybe it's some kind of mix. But, there's a million different things. But Greg Dworkin is here with at least 17 to 22 of them, which is about how much snow there is on the ground as well, inch-wise. If you're metric, forget it. You find another show. This is America. Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Hey. Yeah, so we got about 19 and a half inches officially.
That is in the range.
And so, I got about 19 and a half stories over here.
Okay, we'll take, what's the half?
I guess the Jared one is half.
Okay, that's a good story. It is half a story. I don't know what to make of it. The Mexicans probably weren't going to listen to him anyway, no matter who he brought with him. Okay.
Yeah, it's just so weird. I mean, the Mexican ambassador has 30 years of experience. And I guess there was another story circulating around that Trump had asked Jared to study up on China, so he bought a book on Amazon.
Oh, I guess that'll do the trick. Just one book on China?
Yeah, I think it was called Death by China, and that was it. And so he bought this book, and now he's an expert.
Right. I read
I don't even know if he read the book. He just bought the book.
Oh, wow. Well, that's all you really need to do.
That's what you're supposed to do, right? I mean, because if you're a real expert like Jared, what you do is you buy these books and put them on your shelf, color-coded, of course, so it looks best when somebody interviews you and you have your bookshelf there in the background. Right. But you don't actually read any of them.
No, wow. Why would you do that? I have
people won't remember what's in them.
Well, you choose one from column A, one from column B. That's
right.
Usually
so basically, Jared's a moron, and now he doesn't even have security clearance. And probably the reason the ambassador wasn't there is because he's not allowed to talk to Jared.
That could be. You might
ambassadors
slip up
have
and
more
give
security clearance than Jared does.
Yes.
In fact, I saw that John
She's
Kelly was actually rearranging even more staff and either transferring them, firing them, or otherwise taking care of the fact that a lot of them didn't have security clearance, which, as I saw on Twitter, that meant that Jared was likely to wind up in the gift shop because that's about the only thing he's qualified for.
And they're probably selling things illegally in the gift shop like they're doing in Trump Tower as well.
Probably made in China.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and that's probably true, too. They should turn them over and find out. This wave of firings, though, it reminds me there was one early on, like in January, late January, early February of last year. They fired a whole raft of people because they found out very early that they couldn't get them security clearances. And we've kind of memory hold that one. And I'm trying to find the old articles, and they're flooded under everybody else who's been flushed down the ethics toilet since then.
Right. But, people have made lists of everybody, so maybe it's in there. But, the bottom line
they're very minor people.
Yeah, there's been 35% there, 34% turnover compared to 10%, which is what the other presidents average.
Oh. Well, he's winning.
There's that. That's the half story. I want to talk a little bit about guns in Florida.
All right. Guns and that's a band name.
Yeah.
Guns in Florida.
The Gunshine State actually looks like the legislator passed some stuff. Whether the governor will sign it is a different story. But there is legislation that the Florida legislator passed that raises the buying age for rifles to 21 and also puts, I think, a 3-day limit, a 3-day waiting period. You can't just go in and buy one. You have to wait 3 days.
Just rifles?
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
it does, arm the teachers. It does put more armed officers in the schools.
Okay.
But
But
it's Florida, okay?
Oh.
And one can argue that the way that bipartisan legislation is supposed to work is that, and there's a broader point I'm trying to make here, the way bipartisan legislation is supposed to work is you get some stuff in there you don't like, and you put some stuff in there that the other folks don't like, and you get enough votes and you pass it. That's how it used to work.
Yeah.
So the fact that the Gunshine State did anything in terms of waiting to get a gun or making it a little harder because you're older is actually a big deal, because like Florida, I think the Washington Post described it as the test laboratory for gun rights.
I think that's probably a pretty good call.
So for them to do anything in the other direction is actually, somewhat remarkable. Yes, I know the bar is incredibly low. And no, it's not perfect legislation, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
And what happens, in fact, if the governor passes it, because he's not in favor of arming the teachers, but I kind of doubt he'll not do this.
Yeah,
because he wants to run for Senate, so you got to show you did something.
Right. Well, you're right. I think he probably there's lots of good political reasons. I think gun policy wise, the armed teachers program appears on its surface to be kind of arduous, and I'm not certain how many teachers will actually go through with it. So they might be thinking, it won't be so bad because nobody's going to put the time in on this. And Florida's a handgun state more than a rifle state. That's the kind of gun people they've got. So maybe they feel like that's okay. Florida's a place where you keep guns in your pocket and in your glove compartment and in your shorts at all times. And the rifles don't lend themselves to it. But I'm sure there's plenty of rifle enthusiasts who are mad there. But Western states, some of the old deep South states, they really get into the rifles for their recreation. But yeah, I imagine the biggest, loudest, most vociferous gun-owning voices in Florida are handgun people. They might be okay with this.
Well, we'll see. It'll be interesting. So here's an NBC News SurveyMonkey poll. I put that at the very bottom of the list there.
Monkeys.
Top lines from a new just released NBC News SurveyMonkey online poll. A majority of Americans disagree with Trump's proposal to arm teachers. The majority of Americans say some teachers can carry concealed guns as a solution. 42% agree. 76% of Americans are angry or dissatisfied by the way Congress has handled the issue. A majority of Americans, 61%, think government and society can take action that will be effective. 55% of Americans disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling his job. And it's all interesting. So just new stuff coming out today. There's a bunch of polls. And we're going to kind of segue from polls to elections.
Okay. I am losing IQ points looking at this picture of Pam Bondi looking at Donald Trump. My brain fell out the front of my eyeballs here. Okay.
Right. Nate Cohn had a nice piece just below that in your list there. Nate Cohn had a nice piece in the Upshot this morning, New York Times. News changes fast, but polls keep snapping back into place, noting what many have noted. And I've said this all along, I'm not particularly concerned if the Republicans seem to get a little closer or the Democrats go up to 15. I mean, it's basically an 8 or 9 point lead in the generic ballot.
Okay.
And it actually generally changes within that narrow range, just like Trump's job approval changes within that narrow range. And a 10-point generic lead in one poll, that's Q poll, Quinnipiac and Monmouth with a 9-point lead. And Morning Consult with a 7-point lead, which is pretty good because those are usually Trump. That one is particularly a Trump favorite poll.
Oh,
All of this stuff really doesn't make that much difference. It goes up and down, but it basically stays about the same. The Democrats have a considerable lead. Enough to win? Probably, although it's too close to call and too early to call. But those that point out that you shouldn't even be looking at this stuff because it's too early are missing the point of why these polls show Democratic leads, because they haven't always. In fact, it's a bigger lead than normal, and that's because people are unhappy with the Republicans more than normal. So that's in and of itself a story. We see that in Pennsylvania 18, and it's actually less than a week. This coming Tuesday, Connor Lamb will be trying to be the Democrat that beats Richard Saccone, I think his name is, the Republican, who they're both replacing a retired Republican who had to leave for reasons of spending more time with his family.
Yes.
And not somebody else's family in this case, but his family.
Good for him.
He was trying to spend time with somebody else's family, but that's another story. So
Everyone
the whole idea
families.
is that was a 20-plus Trump district, Pennsylvania 18, and it's a too close to call race, which is the story in and of itself. The fact that it's that close is because Republicans are not doing that well. It's a race that the Democrats might win, and if they do, people will make a big deal out of it. And if it is a near miss, you'll have the naysayers who will come in and say, oh, it's just like John Ossoff in Georgia. You make a big deal out of it, but nothing happened. The fact that it was that close is the story, just like it was in Georgia. You don't have to win that particular district, especially because it's the last time the district's going to exist. With the new gerrymandering court case, that district goes away. So, there's a whole lot that'll happen between now and the next election. But the point is, it's highlighting the fact that Republicans are in trouble and they're not particularly popular now. That also goes, and this is one of those things, I always, get annoyed at the media for this. You remember back when W was president, and right after 9/11, he had this huge spike of support because the country rallied around the president in the time of national crisis.
Yes.
And that's not unusual. And then, of course, basically from that point until he retired to spend more time with his family, his approval rating dropped steadily. Okay? And even after he became unpopular, the press continued to refer to him as the popular president because way back right after 9/11, he was extremely popular.
People get
But that wasn't true anymore when people said that. They said it anyway because they're just so used to their own narrative, they weren't looking at the numbers. And the reason I bring that up is it's the same thing with the tax legislation. The default position with the media is that it's popular, even though it's not, and that it's going to help the Republicans, even though it's not. And Pennsylvania 18 is one great example because the Republicans tried running ads. I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday.
Yes.
And it didn't work, and they pulled them. It is not popular. Stop referring to it as popular. Now we get the tariffs. And the tariff story is fascinating because overall it's not going to be popular. We have polling on that. We know that. So the idea that, Trump is doing this because it's going to help him win an election is based on what? Vaporware.
Yeah, somebody
Double
said it
secret
would.
probation data that nobody's telling you. There is no information that actually suggests that's the case other than Republicans on TV telling you that that's the case. But it's not true any more than the tax bill is popular is true. We talked about the fact that most Americans, like only 25%, think that they're seeing extra money in their paycheck. And as far as the tariff thing goes, I heard this fascinating, got to give credit to NPR for this story about a Michigan blade manufacturer.
Blade, okay.
Yeah, knives they call them, but they're really knives for things like wood chippers.
They're
industrial
I see.
knives.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
Getcha.
They're made out of steel.
Right.
And the organization, I think, is Simons, Simonds. And they had acquired a Michigan knife company at one point, which is in Big Rapids, Michigan. It's Trump country, and most of the factory workers there voted for Trump.
It's where,
but it turns
Michigan?
out,
Big Rabbits?
rapids,
Okay.
really fast.
Arliss was all excited. All right.
Right.
Rapids. Sorry.
Rapids, yeah. So
Big rapids.
and Arliss would be the person to talk about this,
Yeah.
actually. But
Huge,
the thing
huge
is
rabbits.
that this particular company uses imported steel because the kind of steel they use in their industrial knives isn't made in the United States.
Oh, okay.
So there are two factories that make it in Europe, and there are two factories that make it in China. So they get imported steel, and then they make these blades and sell them.
Right. Okay.
So if you put a tariff
sounds normal
on steel, then their raw material becomes more expensive.
Yes.
And the factory closes. So all these Trump voters in that factory and in that town and in that area of Michigan who voted for Trump, especially the factory itself, those workers will have their jobs directly ended because they voted for Trump.
Okay. Someone going to tell
them? They know
them?
that, and they're kind of upset.
Oh,
just like the people in Carrier, in Indiana are upset because they were made promises, but the actuality of life being more complicated than bumper stickers makes it so that, this doesn't feel like a win. When are we going to, all this winning?
Well, those guys, the workers must have fallen off their bar stools when they heard the NPR report.
So,
that might be the problem. I see.
So look, it's not all about racism. Sometimes it actually is about economics.
Yeah, well, now they got some anxiety going.
Now they got some economic anxiety.
That's
exactly what I'm saying, to go with the racism.
Well, I knew
not the racism goes away, but now they got economic anxiety that might even overpower that.
It's just a matter of waiting for delivery. We got to speed up the delivery.
That's one small example of how this plays out. So the idea of, the tariffs are going to be we know they're not popular. We've seen the polling. Well, they're going to be popular in Trump areas. Wait a minute. You don't know that. You have to know what is being made and manufactured in that area. And even if you're not talking about that, are you just talking about the price of cars, the price of what you buy, the price of Campbell soup cans, Wilbur Ross? I mean, whatever it is that you're talking about here, it is not automatic that it's a winner. And so don't talk about it as if it is, because you're just saying that because you were told that.
I guess so. I mean, I guess it comes from outdated modes of thinking.
It's not just outdated modes of thinking. It's they ask Republicans to come on TV and make the case. They don't ask Democrats. Republicans show up and are happy to do it, and that's all they hear.
Representations also will do that. That's a long-standing Republican play, and I guess it works. Maybe that's it. Maybe it has to be coupled with outdated assumptions about the industrial heartland will be happy because they are in direct competition with all these imported materials, and they are not. They have long since stopped making this material and instead have switched over to manufacturing finished products out of this material, and that's just too complicated. We have neither the time nor the legal expertise to figure out whether or not we're correct.
Right.
All right.
Needless to say, the economy of the future is going to have a whole lot to do with intellectual property.
Oh, yeah. We talked about all the developments in intellectual property yesterday. Boy.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Here's a piece, just a couple of tweets here from Ariel Edwards-Levy, who works at Huffington Post in the polling section there.
Okay.
And has here's how tax polling out this month looks and how the current tax polling numbers compare to December, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
Support is rising, but still under 50% in everything except SurveyMonkey. And in some cases, like the Politico Morning Consult poll, it hasn't really changed at all. In other cases, there's been, maybe a 10% increase in the popularity of the tax polling, but it's still polling under 50%. And that's not something you can, remember, that's the only thing Republicans have
that is true
to go to the public with and say, we did this. And it's just not that popular.
Yes.
So it's not going to win them elections, and that's why the generic ballot is what it is.
Has anybody measured the effects? How popular are Republican lies about what they've done?
Well, we'll know that when they go to the polls. Okay. The only poll that counts.
We should be polling about that. Will you vote for Republicans who lied about banning gay wedding cakes? Yes.
Now, Greg Sargent had an interesting piece yesterday, which is called Under Trump, the Forgotten Men and Women Are Still Forgotten. Carrier and the Simons blade company that we were just talking about are two great examples of that. But most of the improvement in the economy has come in areas with a lot of people, the urban areas, the areas of the country that have rejected Trump. And those that voted for him come from those areas that haven't done as well economically.
Okay.
And he just provides new data to show that's in fact the case. The way he describes it is the new Brookings analysis underscores a basic truth about our politics. The areas of the country that continue to capture and drive the largest share of the nation's prosperity amid the digital information revolution are the ones, generally speaking, did not support Trump for president. The areas of the country that supported Trump overwhelmingly are the ones that continue to get left behind economically, even with Trump in office. And his tariffs, the point I'm trying to make here, are only going to make that worse.
Well, what if we combine that with one of your other old theories about people failing to come to understand things if their income depends on it? I mean, if he does best where the economy is worst, why not sabotage as much of the economy as possible?
That may well be. These are, parts of the whole thing about Trumpism. The story that Trump allies like to tell, Greg Sargent writes, is that these areas and the people who live in them have been abandoned by coastal and or urban elites who are cleaning up in the globalizing, digitalizing economy. That's how Trump made himself popular.
Okay.
The weird thing is Trump is going out of his way deliberately in action that is not by some giant global force thing that you can't see, but specific policies that he has picked to make it worse. And it's really going to be interesting to see how that plays.
Yes, that will be. Is that in the same Greg Sargent column as the Pennsylvania 18 thing?
No, I don't think so. It's a different one, but I can find it for you.
Okay, well, why not? Everyone will want to read that, and we'll catch up on those things. Well, I guess it's a possibility. He just might be dead set on ruining the economy and then playing on people's economic anxiety. And I told you they were economically anxious. Last time it turned out that they were racist. Not my fault. I made the wrong call there. But this time they're totally economically anxious, and we're gonna play on that. I guess that works unless any of them think, but you said you were going to make it better, and I believed you, and you didn't, and now I'm angry. But so far, none of the people in the diners say so. All right.
We'll see about Pennsylvania team. Maybe they will.
Okay, hope so. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are back. Greg is still with us. Arliss Bunny commenting in the background. If it was Big Rabbits, it would not have gone for Trump.
This is true.
That's probably the case. And she's, by the way, offering herself up to discuss the trade topic. We probably got to take her up on that.
I love when somebody who actually knows what they're talking about comes in. I was telling anecdotes because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, let's set up some more issues we don't know what we're talking about, and see if there are any other experts in the audience who can help us clear it up.
So I have two I want to talk about, Stormy Daniels and Russia. Which one do you want to do first?
How about Russia?
I am so surprised. All right, let's leave Stormy Daniels maybe for Armando later, but let's talk about all the Russias.
Okay, yes.
Because there's a number of stories that broke yesterday, and I think a lot of them are important. Probably the most important, although the most difficult to comprehend, is the fact that the Washington Post and the New York Times were talking about a meeting in the Seychelles.
Oh, yes.
I mentioned the story yesterday, but the Washington Post has more information, basically, that Eric Prince, who used to, I guess maybe he still does, runs Blackwater.
They changed the name
mercenary place, whatever it's called these days.
Right.
Who is the brother of Betsy DeVos.
Right.
Who is a scion of the DeVos family, who are used to moving lots of money around and are experts in it because that's what they do politically.
Yeah.
Was sent basically as a Trump cutout to meet with a Putin cutout down in the Seychelles to set up back channels.
Yeah.
And that's a big story.
All right. It is a big story. And it's been on our radar for some time. It's more and more these days. The stories are ones that we have heard the seeds of many months ago. So I think we prepared you for it very well. This was, this was discussed a long time ago. They interviewed Eric Prince about it at the House Intelligence Committee,
yes,
I think.
Where he lied about it.
Yeah, that's ordinarily a problem, but not with this Congress.
Right, but he lied about it because he left out people who he met. They asked him who you met there, and he mentioned some people, but didn't mention this Lebanese-American guy who was an UAE advisor. That was the original Times story.
George Nader. We mentioned him the other day.
Who helped set this whole thing up, and the Washington Post says he was basically there to set up a back channel with the Russians.
Right.
So everywhere you turn, there's Russians in this Trump administration. How odd is that?
It is unusual. It's a big country, true.
Meanwhile,
Russia,
another story in the New York Times yesterday is that Trump was basically trolling people who he was trying to make them all into Sam Nunberg. You know how Sam Nunberg went on TV, like 8 different channels simultaneously? And said, hey, Robert Mueller talked to me. Here's what he said. Here's the subpoena. Let me tell you the people he was asking about. Let me give you all the questions that he asked about. I'm not answering any of them. I'm not going to do anything that he tells me to do, but I just want you to know what he told me. And so he told the world. And that's how we know a little bit about what Mueller's up to.
Okay.
All right. So Trump wants to talk to everybody who Mueller spoke with that Trump can reach. What did he say? Did you say nice things about me? It sounds as if Trump is trying to coordinate Trump's own story with what's been said. And I'm not a lawyer, but I would think that it's like a really bad idea to talk to people that Mueller's talking to. You'd want to stay away from that. I mean, lawyers use that against you if you seem to be trying to coordinate your story with other people.
Yeah, there's a lot of coordinating going on these days that there isn't supposed to be.
I mean, I was in court once.
You?
Yeah.
Yeah?
About 25 years ago, somebody ripped off my credit card, and I had to go testify against them.
You were an early adopter there. Okay.
So I'm sitting outside in a New York City courtroom, watching all the guys with manacles walk by. Just minding my own business, sitting next to some other guy, and the other guy turns to me and said, nice weather, and I shrugged, and I said, I suppose. Then I'm called in as a witness. And I explained how my credit card was ripped off. And the defense lawyer, first thing he says to me is, did you talk to anybody about this case?
Yeah.
I said, only prosecutor who asked me to be here. Well, did you talk to anybody outside the courtroom? Were you sitting next to anybody? Did you talk about this case with them?
No.
I said, no. He sounded very disappointed. And then the perp was convicted after that.
Yeah.
But, the moral of the story there is like, if you're involved in a lawsuit, don't talk to anybody.
I guess, really. I mean, wow.
Even I know
guy? That is amazing.
I'm not even a lawyer.
Yeah.
And this is like the lowest level possible kind of prosecution. What the heck is Trump doing trying to doesn't Don McGahn, his lawyer, his protect the White House lawyer, tell him not to do stuff like that?
Yes, that's part of the problem. Is that, there's a McGahn has done himself at least the favor of establishing a strong record of telling everybody, I keep telling him not to do this, and he can't do this.
And he did it anyway, so it's not my fault.
Yeah, and I mean, he's really gone out of his way. Not only has he's like self-reported to Mueller, and even other people have self-reported every time he does something like this. I mean, it's a pretty basic thing. But that's what I was talking about up at the top, the very top of the show. I can't always be 100% sure whether Trump is just super dumb about this stuff or it's some mix of, I don't really understand this stuff, plus I've always gotten away with it before, and the wheels of justice turn so slowly that for a guy like me who lives, minute to minute, it hardly matters. I can't tell, but I lean strongly towards the too dumb side. If not really being totally oblivious, then certainly think, but this doesn't apply to me. I can do this. That why should this be legal? I'm just talking to people. But yeah, he's under investigation for obstruction of justice, and he's witness tampering with the obstruction case. It's amazing.
It's not a good look, I would think. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on the internets. But I would think that's just not a good look.
Yeah, you can't call people and ask them, what'd you tell the grand jury? What did Mueller ask you? Even though he asked dopey questions like, "What were they nice to you?" I mean, and
it's
basically might be able to get away with
that report. So that's just so weird. And then the third tangential Russia story, which is also tangential to the Stormy Daniels story, is a whole lot of looking at Trump's longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen.
Yeah, he was everywhere yesterday.
Yeah, well, he's involved because he was responsible for some of the hush money that was paid to Stormy Daniels. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but there's like weird stuff about this, which I hope Armando will come on and explain.
Yes, he's dying to.
Apparently, there's this double secret probation situation where they signed this non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
Which Trump denies knowing about.
Yeah,
so as a layman, I would think, well, if he says he has nothing to do with it, doesn't that mean that the whole contract, therefore, has nothing to do with him, and therefore it's null and void? I mean, how can it apply to you if you don't know anything about it?
I mean, I guess...
I don't care whether he signed it or not. That's not material. But, you know, if he says it's got nothing to do with me, then, okay, I take you at your word. It's got nothing to do with you. I can talk however much I want to.
Well,
even though that she might be there listed as Patty Peterson.
Peggy
Peterson?
Yeah, get the name.
And he's down there as David Dennison.
Right, Diggler, whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, the contract is with a third party, so I mean, I think that the design of the thing was there would be a contract with a third party plus the pseudonyms, and Donald Trump will say, I've got nothing to do with it. Some company, I don't know why some company paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 not to talk about an alleged affair with me, but I guess if they thought it was a good idea, then fine.
So none of this makes sense to people, right?
Well.
And then, Sarah Huckabee Sanders has a briefing about it.
Because why not?
And reporters say, so what's going on here with this and that? And Stormy Daniels says she's not even bound by this anymore for this, that, and the other reason. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders says something to the effect of, this all has nothing to do with us, and besides, we won the arbitration.
Yes, right. Weird.
What do you mean you won the arbitration? What arbitration? Well, it's a double secret probation arbitration. We can't even tell you about that. Go ask his lawyer. But the fact that there was one, doesn't that verify the fact that this whole thing exists and that it's not made up?
Yes, but no, but yes. Yeah.
I mean, that was awfully dumb. So word after that is Trump is really mad at Sarah Huckabee Sanders for spilling the beans.
That's true. Maybe she just couldn't help it. She just wanted the truth to get out.
Well, but, she always lies. Why didn't she lie about this one, too?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, that was the easiest thing in the world. Why not just say, that's not a question for the White House?
Yeah, just the way Ivanka Trump says, don't ask me about my father's sexual peccadillos.
Right.
That's not the question you ask a daughter. But you're a White House advisor. That's why I'm asking you.
I know.
Well, I think it's inappropriate.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, particularly if the line is, we have nothing to do with this, you say, not only does Donald Trump have nothing to do with this, the White House certainly doesn't. I don't know what happened. It doesn't matter. If you have questions about porn stars, I don't know, get internet access and go crazy. But we don't answer questions like that here.
The reason that I hope Armando can come on and talk about this is because the whole issue with Stormy Daniels has nothing to do, importantly, politically, with whether or not he had an affair with her. Presidents have affairs with people all the time. There's a long list. Big deal. So what? It's lying about it, hushing it up, and doing things that may or may not have been illegal or politically inappropriate just prior to being elected so that folks wouldn't know about it. I mean, everybody knows the yuck factor with Trump is already factored into everything everybody knows and thinks about him. This is not going to be a surprise, and it's not going to spoil your opinion of him. Mm-hmm. But if what he's doing is illegal, that's kind of important.
I guess so. I'm not certain that anything...
Why is it illegal? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. That's where Armando comes in.
I don't think so. Yeah, well, he will certainly be willing to discuss it. And, he's giving me more messages in the background. But I'm sure you're wrong. How about that?
Yeah, probably.
We know that much.
So anyway, I think that most normal people who are looking at this whole Stormy Daniels thing, which is generally the fifth story on any given day because Trump has done four other things, and it wasn't the first story we talked about this morning either. Nonetheless, the aspects of it are how he handled it. It's like the gun thing. It's not that Trump shot anybody in Florida. It's how did he handle the aftermath, and that's what we're looking at here. And it's all part of a piece. He's incompetent. He lies about stuff, and ultimately, it's all going to come back to bite him. That's what's going to happen with Russia. The polling says that's what's happening with people's opinion of how he handles crises like Parkland, Florida. And likely that's going to be the case in the Stormy Daniels stuff, too, because he's going to do other stuff that's just going to make it even worse for himself because that's what he does.
Well, yeah, he's kind of a skeevy dude, as we used
pretty
to
much.
say.
And so that's really it. I mean, you don't need the details. You just have to know he's a skeevy dude, and this is going to be more evidence for same. So that's how I'm going to leave it with you. A whole bunch of other stuff here, but those are the basics of what happened. Yeah, Gary Cohn left. Yeah, they're going to replace him. They don't know who with. Yeah, Peter Navarro, who is going to be the economic advisor because he doesn't have any others at the moment until they get somebody like Larry Kudlow. I mean, Peter Navarro is a nutcase.
Is he?
He's a crazy guy. He's like the Seb Gorka of economists.
Oh, that guy's crazy. I remember him.
So, it's going to be pretty fascinating watching how all this plays out. I'll leave that with you.
All right.
And as I say, hopefully Brother Armando will come on and talk a little bit more detail about Stormy Daniels. But with that, this is Greg Dworkin trying to dig myself out of the snow in Connecticut, talking to my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. Did you guys get any snow? It was all rain.
It was not only not snow, but really nothing in the way of rain. I don't know how it happened. We got cloudy, drizzled in the morning. But
I sent David some pictures so he could see all the snow stuff.
Yes, it's white.
But it's white. It's pretty white and pretty tall. So take care, and I'll be back on Monday, I guess.
Okay.
And we'll talk again.
I hear it's going to snow again.
It tends to happen in winter.
Okay. Well, yeah. All right, then. I revise my prediction. Very good. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Thank you. You do the same. Happy shoveling. Don't hurt your back. And let's see. We'll clear the decks here for Armando, who so far this morning has tweeted. Well, I guess we will get to hear about whether or not there is something illegal going on here. Definitely wants to talk about the legal issues, not the political issues surrounding Stormy Daniels' story. Though I suppose it all overlaps. So the deck is clear, and Arliss Bunny offering her services as relates to trade, tariffs, and really just about anything she wants to later on in the program. So we'll take people one at a time here. Armando, you're up next. Caller Armando, what do you have to say?
Oh, who's coming up after me?
Oh, well, possibly Arliss Bunny offering up some time to talk trade and tariffs. And big rabbits.
I can talk about that too. Sorry, Arliss. No, I'm kidding. That'll be great.
What do you got? I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Yeah, utility infielder. Excellent. Okay.
I do think Greg was right, but I would have used, as I texted you, the Otter speech from Animal House line, which is, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be brief. The issue here is not whether we broke a few rules or took a few liberties with our female party guests. We did. We know that Trump took liberties with his adult film star party guest.
Yes.
Stormy Daniels. I don't think Trump wants you to think he didn't.
No,
to be honest with you.
I think he's dying to send us dick pics.
Exactly. So what is the actual issue? It's not bad-mouthing the United States of America. It is whether Donald Trump conspired with Michael Cohen to violate campaign finance laws.
Ah, okay.
Specifically to USC 441A.
You know it's true.
Which limits the amount of money any individual can contribute to a campaign.
Right, okay. So the worry would be if he ponied up the money, as he claims, that's a $130,000 contribution to a presidential campaign, in kind, I guess.
In kind.
Okay.
It was for the purpose of shielding the campaign from a negative story of having an affair with an adult film star.
Which is
a few weeks before the election.
Yes. Right, and that would be presumably, presumably inures to the benefit of the campaign. That's the whole idea here. Even though Trump and possibly would tell you, and Trump supporters would tell you, no, this was just a roundabout way. It's a humble brag about having sex with a porn star. We didn't want to just come out and say it. This was an earned media opportunity for us. That's a good defense.
Now, so you hushed it up before the election.
Yeah,
so
well, we did it poorly so
now.
that you would all hear about this hot porn star that I had sex with.
Well, I thought what was more interesting was the argument that I got from a Trumpster who I broke my rule and engaged. He said it was to protect the reputation of the Trump organization, not to protect the reputation of Donald Trump and his election.
That is what they'll have to say, and
it makes no sense because Donald Trump is the Donald Trump organization.
Oh, well, yeah, there's that too.
And he was the candidate for president of the United States. And the payment happened 3 weeks before the election, not 3 years before the election.
That is true, too.
Stormy Daniels gave an interview to In Touch magazine in 2011 about this affair.
Yeah, they waited a long time to worry about the reputational damage to the Trump organization, didn't they?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay,
it
I see
simply
your point.
doesn't. But could Donald Trump have paid hush money for political purposes? In fact, he could. The problem was he violated the campaign finance. So if Donald Trump wasn't a cheap bastard who cheated everybody out of every penny and actually gave Cohen the money to put into that LLC he put in and then just reported it as a campaign contribution by himself, there wouldn't be a legal issue because an individual can donate as much as he wants to his own campaign.
True, okay.
Now, there may be some iteration where this is a violation because it's not a proper purpose. That's beyond my knowledge. Maybe there is some limitation of what you can use campaign funds for. I don't know. But
it's entertainment.
But suppose he didn't call. He just said, listen, I'm worried about my reputation. I'm worried about my relationship with my wife. I don't want her to be harmed by this. Who's going to say no? The issue was Michael Cohen took the position that he did it out of the goodness of his heart. In fact, he took the position a few weeks ago that Donald Trump didn't even know anything about this.
He initiated it on his own.
He initiated it on his own. Donald Trump didn't have any approval. He didn't expect reimbursement. All these things. Yesterday, that story was blown to smithereens. Ironically, it was blown to smithereens by the White House press secretary.
That's pretty dumb. Okay.
Yes, the White House press secretary said the issue has been resolved. President Trump has won. There's been an order issued.
And was there?
There was what's called an arbitrator's award issued. For reasons unknown to me, this arbitration association, most people will be familiar with, at least on the East Coast, we're familiar with the AAA, American Arbitration Association, which is the granddaddy of them all, as they say about the Rose Bowl. A newer organization, which has gained a lot of traction on the East Coast, is called JAMS, JAMS, and is something arbitration mediation service. I forget what the J is. And then there's this ADR services, which apparently has a fixture out in the West Coast. And again, I hadn't read the contract, but I remember someone mentioning that it had a JAMS provision in it, but apparently it also has this ADR services provision. I don't know. Anyway, it turns out Cohen, through that LLC, filed an arbitration in California, which apparently was an acceptable forum per the agreement. I don't know exactly, and asked for what's called an ex parte order, which again, according to the ruling, was permitted. Ex parte, by the way, folks, not to be fancy on you, is when I go to an arbitrator or a judge and I don't tell the other side.
Okay. Yeah.
That's really extraordinary. You don't do that unless you're trying. Unless there's in court, it's almost impossible to do. It's really something that's done to capture. In my experience, I've done this to get counterfeiters of trademarked items. Those fake Rolexes and stuff. I once had a case where someone's stuff was being counterfeited and sold on 14th Street. If people know what I'm talking about in New York, where there used to be a lot of counterfeit goods sold there. And you don't want to tip them off because you want to capture them, and that was an exception that's built into the trademark rule for that specific purpose. It's how clean it is. Well, you got to post the bond and things, so at least there's some protections.
Ordinarily, though, anytime you go to court, the other side is allowed to be there to say, "Hey, that ain't true."
Right. It's the fundamental due process protection is I have a right to be heard. Notice an opportunity to be heard.
Confront your accusers.
Right. So Michael Cohen, through his LLC, hired an attorney in California to file this arbitration and apply for an emergency relief ruling. I actually looked at the rules of the ADR services, and there's no provision for ex parte. In fact, everything in it says the rule says you have to actually certify that you notified the other side. But I suppose you can alter the rules by agreement, though there's not even a specific provision for that I saw. Oh. So I'm not sure this ADR services acted properly.
Yeah, there should be a pretty strong presumption against ex parte proceedings in arbitration, I would think.
Yes, and in everything. But
yes,
I'm just
that's right.
telling you, I read the rules.
Private.
There's no actual provision for ex parte.
Okay.
But I think there might be an issue there within the context of the arbitration. But the point being, though, is that they got this ruling. Normally, it's called an award. They called it a temporary restraining order. But here's the problem: arbitrators can't actually issue orders. They issue awards that then, if you want to enforce them, if there's not an agreement that someone's going to comply with it, you actually have to go to court to confirm the award.
Yeah, arbitration, I mean, I guess if there's anybody not familiar with it, it's an entirely private system.
Yes.
It's a very weird thing that it even was invented in this country. But
not only was it invented, then we have a Federal Arbitration Act, which basically makes them, in many ways, impregnable. The rulings on attacking an arbitration award are incredibly onerous. And that's a story for a whole nother day about consumer arbitration agreements and how bad they are. But and whether they're adhesive or not to bore everybody with all law school terms that you learned in contracts first year law school. But that's a whole nother discussion. But anyway, to get back to what this happened here, so Cohen goes. He gets this thing. He sends it to Stormy Daniels' attorney, who was the attorney at the time, but he knows that she has a different attorney, and he didn't send it to the guy that was on TV yesterday and the guy who's talking all the time now for Stormy Daniels. I forget his name.
Me too. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. Stormy Daniels' current attorney. And he purposefully doesn't send it to her current attorney.
And then so he can say,
they find out about it, obviously.
Yeah, okay.
And they file a lawsuit. And they say, I'm not subject to this arbitration clause. I'm not subject to this agreement. Donald Dennison, or whatever name he picked, Donald Trump, a.k.a. Dennison, David Dennison, that was the name he chose, didn't even sign this. This isn't enforceable. Well, whether that's enforceable or not, whether there was an agreement or not, whether this is a two-way or three-way, those are legal questions that someone's going to figure out. But when you look at the agreement, Donald Trump was clearly supposed to be a party to the agreement. He was supposed to sign it. We've seen this now. And Michael Cohen lied 3 weeks ago. I know you're shocked. Yes. Sit down. Michael Cohen lied again, amazingly. And what you have here then is exposure that, at the very least, Michael Cohen thought he was acting at the behest of Donald Trump.
Yes.
When dealing with Stormy Daniels before the election.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't solve his campaign finance problem, though, because even if Donald Trump said, I will pay you back for the $130,000, that's not something a lawyer can do. There's frankly an ethical violation. I can't front you the money to pay for something like that, to pay a settlement. I might forward expenses on during a litigation. I could pay the court reporter for a deposition. I might pay the filing fee, and then I bill you for it. But Michael Cohen says he didn't bill him for it.
Oh, freebie.
Even if you thought it was okay, it's 2 years later. He still hasn't billed him?
I guess not. He doesn't have a good code for him.
Exactly, the code. So what do we have here? We have this mess. And then, to top it off, speaking on behalf of the White House and the President of the United States, Sarah Sanders says the president won the arbitration.
Okay. That is a little bit odd, to say the least. So
who told Sarah Sanders about this?
That's a good question.
Let's start with that question.
Yeah, why would anybody have spent White House time on that?
But this was Michael Cohen's personal business, right? Or so we were told.
I guess so, or on behalf of the Trump organization, which is separated by a firewall, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's a good point that it would be difficult to say with certainty whether or not the payment was made on behalf of the Trump organization or the Trump campaign, and there's lots of evidence that weighs one direction or another. But if there's any claim that it was done for the Trump organization, you have another problem in telling Sarah Huckabee Sanders about it. She was never supposed to hear what goes on in that. That's Eric Trump's problem. Interesting. We'll take our break and be right back with more after this.
Arguably, the only person who is entitled to that information is a matter of attorney-client privilege, because these are confidential proceedings.
You know what?
Donald Trump.
Okay. You know what? I realized again. Once again, we've gotten so involved in our discussion that we've talked our way through the end of the break. But everybody's hearing our discussion, which is fine, because one, it's totally legal under FCC code, and two, we were going to tell you anyway. Yeah, if you missed any of it somehow because we talked our way through the break again, the 1 minute break. This is a real puzzle, because we're having difficulty understanding who would even bother to tell Sarah Huckabee Sanders about. We started this discussion saying it was ex parte, which means that basically even the other side wasn't notified. The only people who would know that there was an ex parte proceeding and some sort of arbitration award would be Michael Cohen and the lawyer he hired to handle this West Coast arbitration, and presumably one other person with interest in the proceeding who would be entitled to the information. And as you were saying, because of attorney-client privilege, that the only person there would be Donald Trump. And would it really be, is Donald Trump really so dumb that he gets that news and then says, listen, Sarah, before you go out there for the briefing, I won. This is all stupid because it's all over. I won. She's not allowed to talk. Here's what I did. I sued her and I won. So you just tell them that. Nobody else could possibly know it. It hadn't. I thought maybe she read in the papers about this arbitration proceeding and thought she was doing him a big favor. But as you pointed out, that wasn't reported yet. The only way it gets to her is Cohen says, boss, we took care of it. You won. And Donald Trump says, listen, tell him I won. I went to court and I won. And that's, again, amazingly stupid. I don't know what to say.
I'll go one further. I think that there's probably a requirement that all the proceedings in the arbitration be confidential. I think that Trump telling Sarah Sanders probably violated that confidentiality provision. And, of course, Sarah Sanders telling all of us really violated that provision. Now, we knew there was an arbitration.
Yeah.
Because there was a filing. But, of course, a court filing is absolutely privileged, and you can't be sued for it, though arguably it should have been filed under seal, I guess, would be the argument. But their argument is we're not even subject to that, so we don't have to do that. But anyway, those are minor issues. The major issue I still go back to is Donald Trump conspired with Michael Cohen to violate the federal campaign finance laws. This is not conjecture anymore, is it?
Well, it's certainly a valid, a valid charge. I mean, there's various defenses, I guess, you could throw up in the way, but it's pretty clear that ordinarily somebody would have to have a look at this and say, all indications are that this was an illegal, excessive in-kind contribution. Of course, you'd kick that to the FEC, which now says, we're tied 2-2. Sorry, can't help you.
Well, prosecutors don't vote. They indict.
That's true. If only there were some independent prosecutors.
Well, that's the question that I think you and I raised a few weeks ago when we first discussed this issue. Is this under Mueller's mandate? I don't think it is. I mean, I don't, but it could be. I know anything that comes within his purview. I don't know how this necessarily came within what he was investigating, but it's possible because of the crazy LLC that this idiot formed.
Yeah.
And it got flagged a year later as a suspicious transaction.
Right, true. That's
which the story that came out a few days ago. Why it was a suspicious transaction, I'm not sure. Did the money come from Russia?
No, the bank didn't like it. It was $133,000, and I guess that, trips an alarm somewhere. Don't they usually flag almost anything over $100,000? That's why everybody gets paid $99,999.99 on these deals. $133,000 wired to, I guess by the way, I mean, if you're sending somebody, wiring something in excess of $100,000 to somebody's account, that's I think that's probably a fair game to put a suspicious flag on that. You're exceeding FDIC insurance limits on this. Okay, you sure you want to put this money in this account? We can only insure it up to $100,000. And if people insist, what do I care? Anything in excess of $100,000, I lose. No problem. Go ahead. Well, that's somebody playing fast and loose with something. I'll hang a flag on that.
Right. But either Mueller can do it or he can't. But what if he can't? The Justice Department can't investigate this. There's a conflict.
Right. Well, yes, but sure. I won't recuse myself this time.
Well, I mean,
I won't make that mistake
twice.
Part
of the campaign. This is an investigation about a campaign finance issue.
Yeah. Oh, I was on that campaign.
Conflicted, but he's not the guy. He can name a special prosecutor. The question is there a U.S. attorney who's not conflicted? I guess possibly someone could be found to do it. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, at the very least, he can very noisily announce that he's restricted from investigation. I didn't know for sure whether this fell under my purview or not. I've investigated it pretty thoroughly. There's all kinds of evidence of a crime, but I can't prosecute it. I just wanted to say that, therefore, I am not prosecuting this open and shut case of criminal violation by the Trump organization and or Trump campaign. Thank you. That's a good press conference to have.
Okay, I want to take this just a step further because what I'm thinking is open and shut now, or is becoming more so, at least to be having to be investigated, is did Donald Trump? Because if Michael Cohen did it on his own, it'd be just a Michael Cohen problem. But I believe that the actual agreement itself and what we've been hearing and the reactions we saw yesterday about the arbitration award, including Sarah Sanders' statement, indicates that the evidence will be overwhelming that Trump conspired with Cohen prior to the election to make this payment. And that means he conspired with him to violate campaign finance laws. Now, you'll recall the John Edwards case. And the John Edwards case not only went to an indictment, it went to the jury. And the jury hung on most charges. People think that John Edwards was acquitted. He was acquitted on one charge, but it hung on the other 5. Okay? So my point is the evidence from what we don't know why the jury didn't vote to convict or what the votes were, but the surmise was that the evidence of conspiracy was not there. It was more of John Edwards, boy, I've got this problem. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then his friend sort of independently, at least that was John Edwards' story, helped his problem. Right? So he didn't conspire. And then the other defense was, well, this really wasn't for the campaign. And that's really because the I didn't conspire argument, I think, has fallen apart. So the what's left that's like John Edwards as a defense, by the way, a defense that was presented to a jury that hung. Okay? This wasn't like, oh, this is a crazy case, dismiss it. It went to a jury.
Yeah, right.
That hung, did not decide the issue. They could have retried him if they wanted to. So what the argument that I see that's still available for Donald Trump on this charge would be this wasn't a campaign contribution. Okay, then what was it? We've gone through these permutations just a few minutes ago, which is I was helping the reputation of the Trump organization, my personal reputation, but those things were so tied up in his candidacy, I don't see how that even flies. I think this is a very strong case for a prosecutor if a prosecutor really wants to do this. Of all the things, there are things that are more important, policy-wise, otherwise, on this conspiracy for Russian interference, the money laundering stuff, all of those things that we don't know that much about yet because it's all under lock and key and Mueller doesn't leak. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know the Seychelles stuff, or, there are things we know. But I guarantee you, we don't know 80% at least of what Mueller knows on those things.
Yeah,
but probably. We know these things. And of all the things I know, this is the strongest criminal case against Donald Trump that I've seen so far. And I'm actually curious why people are not reacting to it in that way.
We've been told, conditioned for a long time, not to go all in on sex scandals because policy is more important, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I guess.
If this was any other president, we would be convening an impeachment commission immediately.
Well, that's true of almost everything about the guy, but yeah.
Yes, but this is in the classic, nobody can argue, what's a high crime and misdemeanor? Conspiracy to violate the campaign finance laws at these levels is a felony that carries up to 5 years in prison.
Okay. I'll take it.
If the president of the United States did that, would that be an impeachable offense? No one would argue that it wouldn't be, right? If John Edwards had been president when all that stuff came out, would there not have been impeachment hearings?
Yeah, I imagine there would have been.
It would have been a national crisis. Everything would have stopped until we got to the bottom of what happened.
Yeah. Well, there's some discussion.
As Greg said, this is story number 4. I think it's story number 1. And I sent you a tweet that I said over Bernie Sanders. Oh, how could they be talking about Stormy Daniels when the bank reform bill? And I understand the importance of the bank reform bill. It's an important piece of legislation. It's being considered now. It's a bad bill. We should try to stop it. But you cannot pretend that the President of the United States being implicated in a felony is not an important story. And that was a bad tweet by Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's sort of part of the repertoire. I don't care. I don't care about his personal, we sort of without looking any deeper than the fact that it involved some personal peccadillo, we dismiss it like, well, we're conditioned to push those aside. There's much more important stories out there. Well, yeah.
Well, this is a money and politics story if you want to put a policy
that's true.
bell on it.
True. I don't know why.
It was a mindless tweet that somebody in his office, I'm sure he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that may be true. True, too.
I'm sure it had nothing to do with him. But be smarter.
Okay.
On these things.
Well, it won't be hard if this continues to stay in the news. Everyone will be involved in it, and if it develops to the point where people begin to realize, personal aspects aside, there's a serious problem here, one which might just hang him faster than any of the other ones. I guess then it'll garner some additional attention.
I just think the evidence is in plain sight on this one. I mean, there's
a lot of stuff floating around, certainly. What about the I know I've seen people outline this as well, that, this mysterious LLC is formed on, I think, like October 17th, 2016. Yeah. And then the deal is concluded on the 28th of October is the signature on this deal. Although I was a little bit puzzled by the deal that was signed on the 28th said, as one of the provisions of the deal was that the payment had to have been made by the 27th. And then they signed the agreement that it enforces the payment by the 27th and the 28th. But okay.
So that could be a condition precedent to the agreement.
They do this, and but somebody else I guess, combed through the FEC reports and came up with during the period of October 17th through 27th or so, the Trump campaign begins making payments to the Trump organization for various, allegedly for campaign functions, but the total mysteriously comes out to $129,999.94 or something like that. Almost $130,000 on the dot, but why not $130,000 on the dot if you really were just going to do that? So I'm not so certain, but
I'm not certain about that. But let's take that scenario out. That in fact, it was the Trump campaign that paid it. Let's say that's the case, and therefore there was not an overage of a contribution by Michael Cohen, who was reimbursed or did whatever he says he did.
Yeah, well then,
and he didn't put out the money himself. Okay,
though he's
here's the situation. Well, then if that's the case, there's not a campaign finance violation and there's not a crime.
Unless it's just that's an illegal purpose for a campaign to be
paying
money. That's a different one.
There are parts of that I don't know. But
I don't know
on the campaign finance issue, that actually clears it up.
Yeah. Now, there was also, of course, the fact that Michael Cohen reportedly had told friends that he was having difficulty getting reimbursed for this.
Exactly.
So that kind of blows all of that up. And also, by the way, great lawyer. So, hey, guess what I did today? You know my client, right? I have one. Yeah. I was paying some hush money for keeping a affair with a porn star quiet, and I can't get paid. Shouldn't that have been confidential? Maybe.
Yeah, it absolutely should have been confidential. Michael Cohen should probably
for that.
Relinquish his law license at this point because all it's going to do is get him in more trouble than he should be in.
If he's just a liar, he's in a lot less trouble than if he's a lying lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, we get obligations put on us that, if you're just
says who
some Trump hack, it doesn't matter. I mean,
if Joey No Socks did it, it'd be fine. Well, except for the campaign finance part.
Well, the campaign finance part is the issue, but Michael Cohen makes this much more difficult because he actually took on the role of lawyer here, and he's pretty much bungled it. And then Sarah Sanders bungled it yesterday.
Whoops.
Again,
fire the woman. That's always the rule, I think.
I think there are more serious things, and you know what I think. I think he was engaged in blatant money laundering. I think he's been running a criminal enterprise since he ran out of money in the middle of the 2000s with the Russians. I really do.
Yes, well, I'm in agreement.
I think that's what Donald Trump is. I think Donald Trump is basically a money launderer. If Mueller's going to get him on the stuff he's looking at, I think it's mostly going to be that. And I think it's serious stuff, and he should go to jail. But of the things I know from public reports and what I've seen with my own eyes, this conspiracy to violate the campaign finance laws is the thing. Again, I think it's dead to rights for the most part, at least for an indictment.
All right. Well,
unless I'm missing something, I wish someone who knew more. I'd actually like to hear from Adam Bowden on this. But he probably, may have some clients who are paying.
Yeah, he jumped out the window an hour ago. I can't take it anymore. Well, we'll find out.
I hope he doesn't have any clients who are paying hush money. But I'm sure he needs to be careful.
Well, what's great about this, by the way, also I think a very fertile ground for investigation of Michael Cohen anyway, if somebody else wants to do that, is that they seem to have a set play, a playbook for how to handle hush money payments for affairs, not necessarily with porn stars, but with anybody. I mean, that he had boilerplate ready to go language for a pseudonymous agreement plus a special attached letter codicil, thinking about how to structure something that would be an enforceable agreement but wouldn't put your client's name on it. Well, that's not really going to fly. Well, it will if you incorporate by reference a separate written document that identifies the client and just hide that better. Yeah, that's actually a very clever invention. It gets around the rule, and the fact that they had that ready to go and roll out in a matter of days suggests that this is probably the 19th or 20th time they've done this. And you'll find much more.
Exactly. I mean, it wasn't their first rodeo.
Yes.
Of course, what's interesting about this, and now if I could just talk about the tactical of the lawyers involved. Cohen's truly a dope. It's amazing. He must, have had a personal relationship with Eric or Don Jr. or something. I mean, there's no explanation for why that guy is on Trump's payroll because he's really dumb.
Which guy?
Cohen, Michael Cohen.
Oh, okay, all right.
I mean, Trump actually has a pretty good lawyer named Alan Garten, who's really like the general counsel of all the Trump organization. I mean, he keeps the ducks in a row as much as possible dealing with that client. Cohen, I don't know what he does. It's kind of weird. But, okay, so you play this out. There's this lawsuit now in Superior Court in Los Angeles. And this guy says, I'm not subject to this arbitration clause. Of course, that's an issue. And one of the issues is Donald Trump didn't sign it, and Donald Trump's not a party to it, and there was no meeting of the minds, and yada, yada. Mm-hmm. All the arguments that you hear. Well, guess who's the star witness in this? Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, he's one of the minds that was supposed to meet. Unless it was just EC
what are the issues here? Well, did you have an affair? They get to videotape his deposition. And he gets to admit that, I had an affair. And you had an affair while your wife was pregnant. Yes. And right after your wife had a baby. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump's not going to prosecute this case, is he? So where does this go? What is Michael Cohen thinking by trying to do this? He's got to let Stormy Daniels talk and just deny it and forget about it. This is what I'm saying is stupid about the guy. He didn't think 3 steps ahead.
He wants 1/3 of the liquidated damages, the $1 million award that's in there.
Unbelievable. But or there's another possibility on that.
Yes.
His moron client insisted that he do this.
That could be. That would explain it. You go and you tell, I'm going to sue her, I'm going to sue the pants off her. I already did that.
That's where the problem started.
Right.
Anyway, and actually that theory fits more closely into Sarah Sanders talking about the big win.
Yeah, I guess.
The report this morning is Trump is mad at Sarah Sanders for what she did at the press briefing yesterday. Yes. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
He's
right.
He's upset with her.
For Women's Day.
For Women's Day. He's upset at women on Women's Day
because
that's
fault.
what he does with women every day, so why not on Women's Day?
Right.
I think Trump did this. Just like the story that I don't know if Greg got to, McGahn. Yeah. The McGahn story where he said, go deny that I told you to fire Mueller.
Right.
I said, I can't because you did tell me to fire Mueller.
Right.
No, I didn't. Yes, you did. And today, he's telling Sarah Sanders, you're fired for talking about the arbitration. You told me to say we won. No, I didn't.
I think you're right. That's probably exactly how it's playing out. I did not. And, he'll have the final call on it. I wonder whether he'll push her out or what. But
this is a mess for him. I think this is actually a mess. But the thing what happens here is, unless they just withdraw the order and say, all right, you can talk, do whatever the hell you want. Mm-hmm. Just give me back the $130,000. So what is it? What do you want? I'm keeping the $130,000. And there's a lot because to get the $130,000, you got to sue too. So I don't know where this goes, but if Trump has any sense, he doesn't. If he has any impulse control, he doesn't. They should pay her another $1 million to go away. Let's be honest, and call it a day. Give her a new NDA for $1 million this time.
I thought that was a little low. I don't know how they came up with that number, but okay.
She didn't know. Listen, I got to be honest with you. How much trouble would it have cost Donald Trump for that story to break a week? Nobody cares. Everybody assumed all this stuff about him. Uh-huh. Nope, nothing mattered. I find it hard to believe that a consensual affair was going to make all the difference a week before. It's weird. Unless, frankly, maybe his wife was really upset about it. I don't know. It's hard to fathom why they thought this was worth paying. Of course, there's the question of the pictures and the images.
Right. Well, he wanted the intellectual property in them. In case I found that pretty amazing. But I know that's just a way of controlling the things, just like the National Enquirer wasn't really interested in the Playboy model's story. They just wanted to buy it so they would have the rights in it so that they would then not publish it, and neither would anybody else. But, the possibility of a Donald Trump branded sex tape was pretty cool for a minute.
Hard to believe.
Yeah, he just wanted but what's hard to believe is that anything would have existed. And it was specified that, that this applied to images that he produced, not that he thought she might have snapped a photo of him on her phone at the time, either for fun or for proof or whatever. The contract didn't seem to be seeking her photos that she had created. He was worried about things that he had sent, which is a stunning admission of sorts. But you could just say it's overprotective.
That's interesting too. But I thought it was more encompassing. I thought it was everything, anything that they had ever produced in the entirety of the time. So
they might think so, but that wasn't my reading of it. But
so. What motivates all this? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. Maybe it's a really incriminating photo. Maybe who knows? Maybe it's just stupidity. But this story isn't over, and there's actually something about it that matters. That's a legal jeopardy issue, and I hope that we don't get to. And I see too many Democrats doing this. Oh, well, it's salacious, therefore that's not what we're going to be about. Listen, it's a crime.
Yeah,
just
sex
because
is a good
it's salacious
hook,
doesn't mean it doesn't matter.
No, it makes it more fun and interesting. And, but it makes you look like you're,
Ken
dealing
Starr.
Right, or you're dealing in sleaze, and it's like, well, I mean, the guy we're after is a sleaze dealer. I can't help you.
That's where the money is,
right?
In the sleaze. I mean, that's the money laundering, everything else. This is just another aspect of the completely sleazy, no class, horrible criminal person that this guy always was.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, I know you got Arliss coming up, and we got a break coming up. But,
yes, we do.
I just wanted try to put some perspective on this, because I think this is a bigger story on substance than people want to, or that people have expressed.
Well, I think fair enough. I think we've made the case for it, and now you don't have to feel bad or awkward about perpetuating the Stormy Daniels story. You can say it's entirely about substance and feel good about it.
It's the ethics of campaign finance.
There you go. Money and politics. You like that as an issue. I like that's a good way of putting it. Thanks, Armando. We'll take our break.
Thanks, David.
Be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're done. We've finished the Stormy Daniels issue for the day. I'm sure we'll be back to it tomorrow. Once again, paying just a little bit too much attention to it. But this time, we brought Armando in to give us a pretty good excuse. You don't have to feel bad about pursuing the Stormy Daniels issue. There might be something of serious substance there. But we can only tolerate so much of it. And now turning to things for, I guess, matters that those of you who still won't believe that the Stormy Daniels issue is a substantive one. How about trade? How about steel tariffs? How about Donald Trump's bluster on the subject? Arliss Bunny is with us all the way, not from Big Rapids, Michigan, although that would be a great name for a town. It isn't one, but
that's right.
We're pleased to have you. Hi, how's it going? And
good to be here. Listen, trade is, of course, on everybody's mind right now. It is a big subject, and because of that, the folks, Travis and Rachel from Irreverent Testimony, and my podcast partner Will from Hopping Mad, and I, so Irreverent Testimony and Hopping Mad, are going to put out a joint midweek podcast. We're recording it tonight, so it should go out later tonight or sometime tomorrow, and it will be just a deep dive on trade. So, and we'll put it out on both of our channels, so you can get it either at Irreverent Testimony or at Hopping Mad on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, etc.
Okay, right, all the channels. All right.
Anyway, but to hit the high points, because I think this is a subject that people are really confused about, and part of that has to do with how well neoliberals have sold us the meme, but I want you to, first of all, in your minds, separate the real economy. So that's goods and services. And, of course, as I think of it, that's carrots and veterinarians. So I want you to separate goods and services from what's called nominal wealth. And nominal wealth is basically all the forms that money takes. And because we have a fiat currency, nominal wealth for us is basically an IOU for an IOU. Right? Because it's a fiat currency. Okay. So when we are trading with any country, whether it's China, Mexico, doesn't matter. When we're trading with any company, we are taking in their goods and services, and we're giving them basically fiat nominal wealth. And who wins in that deal? We get the goods and services. And where people come up against it is that they're thinking that we're losing a lot of jobs as a result of that. And where Trump's people are making the disconnect in this particular moment in time is that they're thinking that by imposing these tariffs on, by the way, the wrong people, but by imposing these steel and aluminum tariffs, we are going to drive jobs here in the U.S. But if you're a steel manufacturer, in fact, if you're an aluminum manufacturer here, what it costs for you to tool up, for you to spin up additional production, to hire and train additional people, that is a long-term commitment. That is a huge, big problem. That's not something you do overnight. That's not you walk into another building and turn on the lights and suddenly magically more steel is coming out. You have this is years of spinning up. No steel manufacturer out there thinks that this tariff is going to last for years.
Okay, right.
They've all looked deeply into the eyes of the Republican Congress, and they know this tariff is not going to last.
It might not even fly to begin with if the Republicans in Congress have their way.
Exactly. Huh. So it is, so what's going to happen instead is that if you're a steel manufacturer, it is supply and demand, right? This is a real economy. And they understand that if tariffs have just been imposed upon their competitors' prices have just gone up. So what can they do? They can raise their prices, but that's not going to pass down to the workforce. That's not going to drive more jobs. That's going to drive executive bonuses and corporate profits.
Oh,
so that's who's going to make the money out of this. Surprise, surprise. Wilbur Ross is the Commerce Secretary. Wilbur Ross is a steel company executive.
Okay, so I've seen this problem before, actually, in the school voucher sector. When they said we'll give you $2,000 on top of everything to go to any private school you want, the exclusive private schools that everybody, I guess, thought they were going to get into for $2,000, which was a pipe dream to begin with, just kept themselves exclusive by adding $2,000 to their tuition. That way, it eats up the vouchers, and no dirty, filthy voucher people are going to get in here. Just the elites who can afford the extra $2,000 because they've got a voucher too, because they're not means tested.
Right. And meanwhile, all of our prices have gone up and we're all collectively screwed. So, things just get better and better. And the other thing that's really frustrating about this is that, for instance, let's look at NAFTA for just a second. And with NAFTA, one of the things that people really don't realize that there's a real blindness to in this country is that because of NAFTA, we, and by that I really mean we, built a middle class in Mexico. Well, okay, so now there's a middle class in Mexico, and guess what? They're buying more of our goods than they're selling to us. Mexico is buying more American goods than the U.S. is buying Mexican goods because of NAFTA. It worked. The real problem, and this is a legit problem, it's used in kind of what I think of as it's the wage differential, right? And it's used in kind of a squirrel way. And it's not an entirely false meme. There's definitely a grain of truth there, but the way you fix that is not by racing to the bottom. You don't race into the gutter. You use trade agreements to incentivize and enforce improvements in the other marketplaces. You build other markets that are strong and healthy, and you include in that things like, in the negotiations, you include people like labor and small business, things that, of course, weren't done with the TPP. And you also include things like regulations that involved eliminating tax evasion, limiting monopolies, currency manipulation goes in there. And in fact, that's where you put big environmental regulations focused on reducing climate change. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, of course, you make sure that your enforcement isn't investor state dispute settlement courts, ISDS courts. You make sure that there is a resolution structure that is open to all of the participants in the overall economic system. But so it isn't that trade agreements or free trade is bad, it's that we've done it badly. It can be done well. It should be done well. Roosevelt Institute has some really smart writing on this, and I encourage people to hop over to their website and you hop over there and you put in equitable trade. And they have a really detailed and intelligent paper on this subject. But,
okay,
trade doesn't have to be the problem. And I think the other thing to remember is if you're going to set your hair on fire over some kind of problem in the U.S., debt and the trade deficit, two things that we can sustain indefinitely, by the way, aren't the thing to be setting your hair on fire over. The thing to be setting your hair on fire over is unemployment, the lost productivity of all of the people who are unemployed, who aren't even recognized as being unemployed because of the way that we miscount unemployment in this country. But the unemployed and the underemployed, there's enormous lost productivity, billions and billions and billions of dollars of lost productivity. That is the thing to be setting your hair on fire over if you want to be yelling and screaming about something.
All right. I have matches in case you're ready.
You're all set to go.
Yes. Yeah, well, that makes a considerably more sense, obviously. I mean, everyone knows where you're coming from with the on the question of debt, and I guess on the trade deficit as well. Largely the same problem. It doesn't make a great deal of difference to consumers what the trade deficit is.
Right. Think about it this way. Nominal wealth is sitting in one of three places. It is in the international sector, so it's in, a trade deficit, so to speak. It is in the private sector, so it's with us, with states, or with businesses, corporations, or the government has taken it back in. It can only be in those three places. So where do you want it? You want it to be in your pocket, right?
Yeah, well, preferably, yes.
Yeah, right? So when we talk about those three things, the public sector, which is the federal government, the international sector, and the private sector, which is us, those all have to balance, right? Because money can only be in one of those three places. So, so if you're thinking about where you want the deficit to be in order for there to be an asset on your side of the fence, there has to be a liability someplace else. For you to have a dollar, there has to be a dollar liability someplace else. And right now, that dollar liability sits at the Fed.
Right.
Right? Because when they sent that dollar out into the world, it was an IOU for $1. So on their books, it's entered as a dollar liability. And now you've got it. It's $1 in your hand. So it's a dollar liability for them and a dollar asset for you. That's what a deficit is. It's their liability. The problem is we are always looking at things, and the news pushes us, and the neoliberal meme is to push us to look at it from their perspective instead of from ours. They're investing in us. So a trade deficit is the United States investing in the world. And what we're investing in the world to do is to create markets for ourselves. That's the objective. And when people worry about things like inflation, remember that the way to, inflation is supply and demand again, right? Yeah. And people think about inflation as if there was as if we were in a bubble, and we're not. We're in this great big world. So when prices go up and we have free trade, goods and services come in and, prices equalize. And that's why you have not seen inflation in decades. It's why Japan is working so damn hard to get inflation and has been working on it for decades. a certain amount of minimal inflation is considered good because that's the measure of your economy growing.
Yeah, well.
So, you want to see 2, 3, 4, 5% inflation. That's actually good, as long as wages are growing along with it. Our problem is that we have set up the taxing structures here in this country for corporations in such a way, since Reagan, in such a way that it allows corporations, instead of pushing wages down into, their the workers, the people who generate the real economy, they're taking that and turning it into nominal wealth for themselves. And hence we have inequality. Inequality is the problem. Not deficits, not trade deficits, not federal deficits. Inequality is the problem.
Well, it's certainly been, we've discovered it. I guess the rest of the world is still trying to pretend that it isn't a problem or we invented it. But, very true. I guess that's something that, no wonder they don't want to discuss it. But
more and more and more you hear about the job guarantee programs that are being talked about in progressive circles. And that is the way to fix it. JG programs are a really powerful tool, as is, by the way, the other part of that is relief of student debt would make an enormous difference in this country in terms of being an economic driver. Because right now, young people, or in fact, a lot of middle-aged people, are still paying off student loans instead of doing things like buying houses and cars.
Right.
Buying durable goods. Therefore, the economy is muted. It essentially is putting this downward pressure on the economy.
Yeah, if every third dollar goes to the financial sector, where there are certainly people employed there, but it's not nearly as labor intensive as manufacturing of durable goods.
It's not as productive in terms of the kinds of things that grow your economy in the future. Whether you are growing, the skill sets of people who are going to invent, software or whatever that is going to, drive the next generation of Russian troll hunter apps or whatever,
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever you're inventing, that kind of thing, the financial sector isn't helping us get from A to B. They are these derivatives and the kinds of things where they're, cranking money into these exotics that they're cranking money into is basically taking money out of our economy. It's taking money out of circulation. It's not doing the job that commercial and investment banking was established to do. And, of course, the banking legislation being passed this week, as Armando mentioned, is a really, really bad deal.
Is it? I imagine that was always going to be the case, even without looking into the details of it. I know who's in charge.
Yeah.
Well, all right. This is now again. Let's remind everybody also that you go much more in depth in this, and you have some partners in the podcast who are capable of actually maintaining their side of the discussion, as opposed to saying, yes, oh, okay, yeah, that's too. So joint podcast, you and the Irreverent Testimony gang, along with Hopping Mad.
Rachel and Travis from Irreverent Testimony, and Will, my podcast partner on Hopping Mad.
All right. And when will we be able to hear and download?
We're recording it tonight, and I think we're both going to try. I don't think either of us are planning to do any real editing. I think we're just going to put our own, front ends on it and send it out. So it'll probably go out later tonight or tomorrow.
All right. You don't have to wait. Excellent. All right, we have to kind of wrap up with the other stories that I need to. I must get some things on the record here today that have happened. I can't leave it all to Justice, but certainly he'll be batting cleanup on a lot today. Thank you for coming by and explaining it. Appreciate it as always. Trade it's huge these days. Even though Donald Trump has abandoned calling things huge lately for whatever reason. We remember that he used to do that. And, if you've got the sense that we're approaching this thing backwards, you're right. And you'll be able to find out more about why so that you can carry that into your weekend discussions, probably tonight or certainly by tomorrow, a detailed recounting of all of it. Thanks to Arliss for joining us.
Many carrots.
Thank you. And, all right, I'll be looking forward to it for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Take care. And all right, so what have I got here? I've got about 10 minutes to wrap it all up and call out a few of the stories. A few that I put aside and a few that are flaring up right now. I have no idea about this one, but I must return to the news that Eric Prince may be in some fairly serious perjury trouble. If only there were a Congress that were interested in prosecuting him for it or referring the case for prosecution to a U.S. attorney who wasn't very likely friendly to the Trump administration and those who made these efforts on his behalf. It's a pretty big deal. The Washington Post came out with the story last night. Mueller's working on it, so there is that, and I guess he can bring the prosecutions there. That's one thing. I guess if he considers it to be under his umbrella, that's good news. Mueller gathers evidence that this 2017 Seychelles meeting was, in fact, an effort to establish back-channel communications with the Kremlin. They keep trying to do this, which is amazing in and of itself. And the fact that this happened in 2017, it just sort of struck me that Kushner's efforts to establish back-channel communications came during the campaign when it wasn't clear that they were capable of winning or that they would win, and they were not in government. And then during the transition, though, that was happening there too, that much more troubling. But even post-transition, they're still trying to establish back-channel communications. How can it be that the current American administration needs secret back-channel discussion with the Kremlin out of eye and earshot of, I guess, our intelligence services? That's a very strange thing. Plus, of course, the fact that he flat out lied to it. He told the House Intelligence Committee that, yes, he did admit he was in the Seychelles. Yes, he admitted that he met with someone who was reported to be a close associate of Putin's, but he portrayed it as a chance meeting, that he was just in the Seychelles, which Eric Prince could be. I don't know where this globetrotter trots off to now and again, but he portrayed it as a chance meeting. I'm just here in the Seychelles doing my thing. And as it turns out, there's a Russian there too, and somebody said, you should meet this guy because he's an associate of Putin's and you're a mercenary, so that would make for a good meeting. Turns out, of course, that one of the witnesses cooperating with Mueller, whose name we only learned or really injected into the narrative a few days ago, George Nader, the Lebanese-American businessman who helped organize, a number of things, including, lobbying on behalf of the UAE. He organized the Seychelles meeting. In other words, as a cooperating witness, he told Mueller, Eric Prince is full of it. He wasn't just in the Seychelles for the hell of it, and he didn't just have a chance meeting with these Russians. I arranged it and attended the meeting, and I'm willing to tell you that that's not the case. That's fairly serious. Nader, it says here in the article we're reading here, written by Sari Horwitz and Devlin Barrett. It does say here, Nader began cooperating with Mueller after he arrived at Dulles International Airport in mid-January and was stopped, served with a subpoena, and questioned by the FBI. These people, I guess, with knowledge of his dealings with Mueller. By the way, that's at least the second person that Mueller has nabbed and turned into a cooperating witness at Dulles. They love waiting for these international globetrotters to arrive at Dulles and get nabbed that way. I think that's exactly how they started with Papadopoulos, that these guys are flying around the world making these deals, and they know about it, and pick him up at the airport, which is really kind of incredible when you think about it. It says here, though, the article continues, last year Prince told lawmakers and the news media that his Seychelles meeting with Kirill Dmitriev, the head of a Russian government-controlled wealth fund, another one of those sovereign wealth funds, was an unplanned, unimportant encounter. It came about by chance because he happened to be at a luxury hotel in the Indian Ocean island nation with officials from the United Arab Emirates. In his statements, Prince has specifically denied reporting by the Washington Post that said that the Seychelles meeting, which took place about a week before Trump's inauguration, so still transition after all, was described by U.S., European, and Arab officials as part of an effort to establish a back-channel line of communications between Moscow and the incoming administration. Prince told lawmakers on the House Intelligence Committee that he didn't plan to meet Dmitriev in Seychelles, but once he was there discussing possible business deals with UAE officials, they unexpectedly suggested that he visit the hotel bar and meet Dmitriev. And he goes, way out of his way to maintain that illusion. Although, as others have pointed out, and where did I put this one aside? Is it Natasha Bertrand who tweeted this? Yes. Okay. Let me pull this one up and just cram this in here. She says, it's worth remembering that Eric Prince, is an MBZ associate. That is the officials, the initials of one of the officials over in the UAE, has known Nader for over a decade and lives in UAE. Don't forget that Eric Prince lives in the UAE. He didn't have to fly to Seychelles in order to meet with UAE officials, right? He just walks down the street. I'm sure it's a drive, but he lives in the UAE. He doesn't have to mysteriously end up on the same island. Or as he says, I was there conducting business with UAE officials, and they said, hey, this guy Nader happens to be here. Hey, this guy who's a friend of Putin's happens to be here. Wouldn't it be great if you met them? Again, I didn't meet them halfway. I didn't fly from Michigan to Seychelles and they from UAE to Seychelles. I lived down the street from these guys. He didn't have to go there in order to meet with them, unless, of course, there was another reason for him to show up in Seychelles to talk to the people who are otherwise basically his neighbors and business partners at that. So that is something definitely worth keeping in mind as well. Much more, of course, that we didn't get to. Kushner implicated in another quid pro quo deal. I guess another thing that Apollo, well, I guess it's not another quid pro quo, but another reason to believe there was a quid pro quo with Apollo Global Management. Apparently, they had their fingers in a water deal that didn't make any particular economic or environmental sense in California, I believe. So we'll pick up the ball on that one and talk about it a little bit. Apparently, some legal and environmental hurdles that suddenly went away for this deal that Apollo had a big stake in as soon as Apollo ponied up a couple $100 million for his family business. So lots to dive into there. More to discuss about Donald Trump just wandering the halls of the White House, asking people who have talked to the grand jury and with the special counsel, what'd you tell him? I want to know a little bit more about that. And, much more. We got a good Friday show on tap, catching up with all the things that you will need to know for the weekend. Let's take a quick look then at what Justice has got on tap for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He's going to have a big job today, batting cleanup for the things we didn't get to. Let's see what he's got planned. What about this? Jeff Sessions declared war against California, and the fifth largest economy in the world is fighting back, as you might expect to be the case. Another big story that we haven't even touched on. So we leave it to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The East Coast Cookbook, first of all we eat is oatmeal every morning, and it doesn't really matter. And we'll let the West Coasters speak to this. Then, on the rest of the menu, 2 Democratic senators asked all the major voting machine vendors whether they allowed Russian entities to scrutinize their software source code. That seems like a leading question. They must know something. Texas voters delivered a new kind of justice by electing a pair of reform prosecutors in 2 big city primaries. You remember when Josie Duffy Rice told us that was necessary. And the openly racist leader of the far-right Lega party credited Facebook, for his party's success in Italy's nationwide elections on Sunday. It's spreading. After the break, when they move to the chef's table, they examine a report that reveals Trump's offshore oil plan threatens millions of jobs. Not creating millions of jobs, but threatening millions of jobs. And Trump wants you, to pay $70 just to see the Grand Canyon, up from $30 that it costs right now. All of that and more on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef de Cuisine Justice Putnam coming up next. Do stay tuned.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, thanks very much for listening, everybody. Boy, I see even more stories developing as we speak. It's going to be a hell of a show tomorrow, so you make sure you tune in with us, and we'll try and wrap it all up. Tennessee GOP has killed a bill banning child marriage, so if you're looking for someplace other than Kentucky to marry your child bride, you got one. We'll see you tomorrow.